Today's speaker is Jeff Tideman, who grew up here in Northfield. He and his wife Madonna own a commercial real estate company. Jeff has been an avid student of the Bible since his college days and has led Bible study groups for more than 30 years. He's traveled with his wife to Israel, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey to learn about biblical places and events. So please welcome Jeff Tideman.
So I think I've got my mic on. Do I?
Yeah.
Do I have that on? Great. Well, hello, everybody. It's really a thrill to be presenting these pictures and story at the North Shore Senior Center. I'm a big fan of what goes on here. It's just tremendous listening to these announcements and the scope of events. And so thanks to Ralph Greenhow for recommending that this be a presentation, and for Jim Otis and Bob, the program chairman, and the staff has been so helpful. Jill is brilliant. And so thank you also for your interest in what we feel was a remarkable trip. Now, here, I've got to get my controls out. Okay. I'm going to be reading a bit of most of this to keep me on schedule. They say that the human brain starts working at childbirth and doesn't stop working until you stand up to speak in public. And so this is going to help me on that. But earlier in 2023, another group had gone on this same tour. Madonna, would you stand up? This is my wife, Madonna, who went on the trip with me. And so earlier in 2023, another group had gone on this same trip, and they were accompanied by a writer from the New York Times and a photographer from the New York Times, and also a prominent Israeli archaeologist. And so this story appeared in the New York Times the year that we went there. Before we went there, a friend sent it to me. And so Saudi Arabia was closed basically to most of the outside world, and especially if you had an Israel stamp on your passport, you weren't getting in. But in 2019, they opened it up to tourism. The Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, wants to diversify the economy away from just oil. So this is a funny headline. Saudi Arabia wants tourists. It wasn't expecting the Christians. And the tour we went on, this is from the brochure, was in October of 2023. And it was with Joel Richardson, who is an author on biblical topics. I'd read all of his books, and we had actually been on another tour of Israel with Joel Richardson. And so he's a great guy. And on these trips, he does these teachings and speaking that add a lot to the sites that you see. And the tour company is called Living Passages. I'd highly recommend them. Their trips are all Bible topic oriented, Bible destination oriented. And Joel Richardson wrote this book, Mount Sinai in Arabia. I actually have some copies, so if anyone is really fascinated with this, you can buy a copy of this book afterwards. Joel didn't discover these things, but in this 200-page, it's an easy read. He pretty well compiles the details that are the support for this location being the real Mount Sinai. And of course, as we were going, friends and family, so you're going to Saudi Arabia, why, to see Mount Sinai, huh? Well, that sounded really kind of weird to some of our family and friends. But if so what prompted us? Well, it was a new and dramatic discovery in biblical archaeology. Of course, these are some of the most spectacular and outrageous miracles in the Bible. And the law and the covenant at Mount Sinai is the foundation of the entire Jewish and Christian religion. The Ten Commandments are the foundation of a lot of our morality and ethics. And it was really significant in civilization in that it's the first time, well, of course, a law believed to be given by God in writing, in an alphabet that people could read, where all people are equal before the law. So our trip, we flew to Istanbul first and had a night there to overcome our jet lag a little bit. And then the next day, we took a 4-hour flight down to Jeddah here, which is the city in Saudi Arabia where people go through on their way to Mecca to do their pilgrimage to Mecca. And we had a connecting flight from Jeddah up to Tabuk. And as you can see, Tabuk is in northwest Saudi Arabia. And then from there, we drove to the sites that we visited. This is the Istanbul airport. It's just huge and magnificent. Have you been through the Istanbul airport, some of you? It's amazing. People from all over the world, airlines from all over the world. And on our outbound flight, we went to the desk of Saudi Arabia Airlines, and this is what the crowd looked like. It was mostly groups of people being led by tour guides to go on their pilgrimage. I believe it's called the Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca. And so here we are at the Jeddah airport 4 hours later. And of course, the Saudi government has plenty of money. Their infrastructure is great. The Jeddah airport is where people go through to go to Mecca. So millions of people go through there, and it's a very nice airport. And most of the people were in traditional Arabian Muslim dress, and Madonna put a scarf, a cover over her head out of respect. Not many people in Western dress, but we did not feel unwelcome. We were, kind of feeling our way through this different culture. The people in these white dresses, apparently this is what you wear either right before or right after the Mecca pilgrimage. And then there's this rather stern-looking fellow with his family. Who knows how many of those people are his wives, but there were all kinds of people in the airport. And then on the right, this is a 3-story aquarium. So you could see looking through it that it's 3 floors, and there's some huge fish in there. That was very impressive to look at while we were waiting for our flight. And here we are in Tabuk. We arrived in Tabuk a few hours before our first dinner meeting. And so, we went out to look around, and this is what it looked like outside the hotel. The roads are good. The sidewalk infrastructure is good. There's nice homes there. There was a lot going on right around our hotel. And we found out there was a mall. So, we've got a few hours to kill. Let's go to the mall and see what that's like. And it was a beautiful mall. You can see the shiny marble floors. Of course, there's not all the different kinds of clothing stores selling a lot of clothes. I guess ladies can wear whatever they want to at home. But a lot of the stores were vacant. But anyway, it was a beautiful mall. We walked around there. And then that night we had our opening dinner. So there were about 20 of us on the trip, ages about 35 to 75 was the group. And one lady was from Brazil. A couple people were from Hong Kong, some from Canada. Excuse me, all our voices are a little croaky this time of year. And so we had a beautiful dinner together, really nice people, was great. One of the nice things about going on a tour like this is what you learn and experience from the other people on the tour. Well, the next morning we had a good breakfast, and our first stop was at the camel races outside of Tabuk. And these are amazing camels. They're very sleek and beautiful animals. The tenders we learned were Sudanese tribesmen. and there are no stands or anything. People would just drive up in their SUV or their Mercedes or whatever and get out, and the camels would run around the track. So it was fun to see that and feel like we were definitely in Arabia. Now I'm going to have some Bible verses in here so we get the Bible story that goes along with these pictures, because the crux of the matter is, did the things we see, do they match what they should look like with the biblical account? And so, the first thing is, you've probably read this, grown up on this story. Maybe you saw Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. And so Joseph was one of the 12 sons of Jacob, right? And these became the 12 tribes of Israel. And Joseph was real smart, and his brothers were envious of him and sold him into slavery in Egypt. And he did a really good job in several things in Egypt. And Pharaoh had these dreams, right, of the 7 good years and then followed by the 7 bad years. And no one could interpret these dreams. Joseph was brought before him and interpreted the dreams. And Pharaoh was so impressed, said, "Here's a man in whom the Spirit of God is," and he put him in charge. So Joseph became really second in command over the entire nation of Israel under Pharaoh. And then back in Israel, the famine hit too, back in the land of Canaan. So Jacob and the family, they were stressed by famine. They ended up coming down to Egypt. They had a big reunion, and Joseph introduces his family to Pharaoh, and he says, "Oh, isn't that great? Your family's here. You take the land of Goshen." Well, Goshen is very fertile where the Nile floods. It's some of the best land in all of Egypt. And Joseph was a high and mighty guy. So Pharaoh gave him and the Israelites the land of Goshen. So here's this verse from Exodus. Then Joseph died, and all his brothers and all that generation. But the people of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. So they really couldn't have done this in Canaan, because Canaan is more arid, and they would have had to spread out more for the population to increase. And then they would have been in conflict with the other nations there, and they wouldn't have been strong enough to do this. So really, in the plan of God, this was how Israel could multiply into a great nation. Okay, here we go. And then you remember the story of Moses. They were having all the male Hebrew babies killed. His mother hid him and then put him in the basket in the river. And Pharaoh's daughter found him. And so the child grew. That's the child Moses. And she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses. And she said, "Because I drew him out of the water." So Moses was raised as a nobleman or a prince, royalty in Egypt. And then when he's 40 years old, he goes out and looking around at how the Hebrews are doing, and he sees one of them being badly beaten by an Egyptian slave master. And Moses got so mad he killed the Egyptian. And he thought that he would get away with it and that no one had noticed, but it became known, and it was a serious crime. So here we see when Pharaoh heard of it, he sought to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh and stayed in the land of Midian. So that in the land of Midian is going to be really the crux of this story in a lot of ways. We'll see that that's very important. And Moses goes to Midian, sat down by a well. You remember the women were there feeding the animals and getting the water, and some bad guys were harassing them. And Moses chased away the bad guys. So the women took Moses home, and he married one of the daughters. And this was the daughter of Jethro, who is called the priest of Midian. So this was Moses' second career is at 40 years old, he becomes a shepherd for the next 40 years. So as you can imagine, he's all over that territory, and you'd get to know it very well, grazing the sheep all around, semi-desert or desert area. And so here he is, he's been there for 40 years. Now, Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. Now, we'll see here is, okay, here we have a Bible Atlas page. And almost every Bible Atlas and Bible authority knows that the land of Midian is here. And so these two things are the two fingers or forks of the Red Sea, right? And this is the Gulf of Suez, where the Suez Canal is. And this one is called the Gulf of Aqaba. And Midian, everyone historically knows, the ancient writers and everyone, that Midian is over here. So now if Moses is over here, is he going to go 220 miles into the Sinai Peninsula to graze the sheep? That seems rather unlikely. Why would he go take the sheep? They'd probably all be dead. No one would survive the trip. This, by the way, is the traditional site of Mount Sinai. And of course, the Israelites were, I think, in Hebron. They came to the land of Goshen. You can see what the Nile's doing here. It's very fertile. And so the traditional site of Mount Sinai is this, which would have meant that their route was through here, down this way, down to that location in Mount Sinai. And you probably heard, well, it wasn't really the Red Sea, it was the Reed Sea, and it was kind of shallow, and they could get across there. Well, the problem with that is, how did they get away from Pharaoh's army? If Pharaoh's army is pursuing them and all they did was walk through a marsh, what's stopping Pharaoh's army from chasing them down and either bringing them back and killing them all? So, let's see, where are we here? Okay, well, this is the traditional site, St. Catherine's Monastery. And have you been there? Some of you? Yeah. And as I understand it, this became a monastery in the 4th century AD. So that's 1,000 years after Moses, when some Christian monks settled here and decided that this was Mount Sinai. And then that became, the traditional site, and that made its way through church history and continued on as the traditional site. But I'm not sure what the ancient sources are that would say about this, but I'm going to be talking about a different site, and I think the other site is more credible. So you might have heard that it wasn't the Red Sea, it was the Reed Sea. Well, the Red Sea in Hebrew, excuse my pronunciation, I don't speak or read Hebrew, is the word Yam Suf. And Yam Suf is used elsewhere in the Old Testament, and it refers to the Gulf of Aqaba in these other passages in the Old Testament. So here we are with Moses and the angel he's out grazing the sheep, remember? And we don't think he went 220 miles down into the Sinai Peninsula. We think he was over there in Midian, not that far from his home base. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush, and he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And a little further down, the Lord says to him, certainly I will be with thee, and this shall be a token unto thee that I have sent thee. When thou hast brought forth the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God upon this mountain. So in the vision of the burning bush, the Lord is telling him he's going to bring the children of Israel back to this mountain where he sees the burning bush. and we think that's in Midian. And again, just to, if you aren't that familiar with this part of the world, just here's another quick look at the map on where we are. This is the Red Sea, the two fingers of the Red Sea. The right-hand one is the Gulf of Aqaba. So the blue line there would be basically the route of Moses to get to Midian and the route of the Exodus. So now back to our trip. And after we left the camel races, we're out there driving through. And it's not like Lawrence of Arabia, where it's just the sand and dunes, and you're just walking through the sand. It looks like Mars. This is a stunning landscape. It's so barren and wide open and beautiful in its own way. Our teacher Joel Richardson has a fun-loving side here. So, but we all got out and walked around to, sort of get into it, experience the land of Saudi Arabia. Well, the next day was October 7, 2023. And so everybody's phones are blowing up with messages about the terrible Hamas attack on Israel. And of course, Israel is blowing up with Hamas rocket attacks. And a lot of the people, particularly Joel Richardson, has a lot of close connections with Israel. So this is just horrifying. We're looking at this. What should we do? And what's going to happen? Saudi Arabia is very stable and safe, but is this going to turn into a regional war? Of course, nobody knew what this was going to lead to. And it was very distressing, but we're out at this location. We just kept going with our itinerary. And so here's, I'm going to see, oh boy, I'm not sure if I can blow this up, but I think it's big enough on the screen there. So you can see that the children of Israel, as they're fleeing out of Egypt after the Passover, they're leaving Egypt, the beginning of the Exodus, and they can't just walk anywhere through Sinai. The topography is very rough, so they're going to need to walk through the valleys, and these arrows show the valleys that they would have walked on. And then this is called Nuweiba Beach, and it's a very large beach on the Egypt side. This body of water is the Gulf of Aqaba, that right-hand fork of the Red Sea. And so there's this fellow named Ron Wyatt, who was quite an adventure character, almost like Raiders of the Lost Ark. And you could Google him and read all kinds of things about this. But he was an explorer who looked for the biblical sites. And in 1978, he was there, and there were 2 columns with Hebrew inscriptions on them. And they were apparently put there by Solomon. Solomon was about 500 years after Moses, but they were put there to mark the crossing place of the Red Sea. So this is the one on Nuweiba Beach, and I'll show you what it looks like on the Saudi Arabian side. First, we'll read the verse and how this agrees with the account of Pharaoh chasing after the children of Israel. Tell the people of Israel to turn back and encamp in front of Pi Hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, in front of Baal Zephon, and you shall encamp facing it by the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the people of Israel, they are wandering in the land, and the wilderness has shut them in. Well, so if they were on this course, you can see the wilderness would shut them in. And if Pharaoh's army is behind them, there's the beach where they have all emptied out onto, and there's no escape. So on the Saudi Arabian side, you can see in the upper right here, the pillar is down, but the Ministry of Archaeology has this plate there marking the location of it. And you can sort of think of reasons why perhaps Saudi Arabia down through history would not want a lot of emphasis on the Jewish exodus or on sites that might be of great interest for the Jews to want to come and explore. So, you can imagine there might have been incentives for them to downplay this. But here we are on what we feel is the crossing point, and it was just an incredible experience for Madonna and I to be there, where we felt like God had parted the Red Sea and the children of Israel had miraculously come through. And where the sun is there in that picture of us is probably the Nuweiba Beach. So that path of the sunlight on the water is approximately the path of the crossing. So, we took off our shoes and got in the water and had this picture. This lower right one is another picture of that place. So we stayed at this rather modest hotel, and we were really enjoying the people on our trip, particularly this fellow Vlado here in the front is a retired firefighter from Vancouver. He's in very good shape. He's a younger guy. And, so in the Toyota Land Cruisers, we're riding around in the Madonna and I and Vlado and the driver. And so we got to know him pretty well. Here's a couple of our drivers, and we're getting ready to go out for the day. And we'd eat our breakfast out on a terrace overlooking the Red Sea. And I wanted to go swimming. I felt, hey, this would be cool. Go swimming in the Red Sea there where all this happened. And so there I am with Joel Richardson and Vlado in the water. And this is just a screenshot of a phone, so you can see on the blue dot where we were. And if you were to call up this location on your phone, on the left, you'd see Nuweiba Beach. And if you touch on that, you'd get all kinds of information about Nuweiba Beach and the things that we're talking about. Right up here at the top is the town of Eilat in Israel, which is a popular place. People have, like a condo there to go be on the sea. And we know some people that have a place there. Okay. So the next, after they got there across safely, Pharaoh's army is gone, the heat's off in terms of that, they went to Elim, where there were 12 wells of water and 70 palm trees, and they encamped there by the water. So we went there too. And we started out at the top of the valley, away from the ocean, walking toward the sea. And so here we are, our drivers dropped us off, and we had this incredibly beautiful hike through this area of Elim, and wells and palm trees. And of course, this well is a modern well, but the fact that you could dig a modern well means that the water is there. And so there are ancient wells, palm trees, even date palms. And we're walking through here for a couple of hours. I think a video is going to start when I click on this. By the way, this is an acacia tree behind us. You've heard of acacia wood, and I think the Ark of the Covenant and certain other things were made of acacia wood. So what happens? I don't think I'm going to let this run. But anyway, so at some points, the springs are turning into streams, and it was obviously a stream that cut this valley. And so it was just spectacular walking through this gorgeous gorge.
Now there's moisture again.
And some places it was dry, and some places it was moist, and
the
palms growing and so on. And then here at the bottom of the valley by the sea, the Saudi government has set up some waste cans and some signs, and they are calling it Wadi Taib Asim or something. But it's kind of disturbing to think if this area starts getting more tourists, and a lot of people are walking through this. I don't know how they're going to preserve, sort of the natural look of it. So again, a key part of this Mount Sinai in Arabia is that we're in Midian, and that Moses is Moses is the son-in-law of Jethro, the priest of Midian. So the fact that this is where Midian is very important. So we're at this area. This is actually in a public park, and it's obviously an oasis here in the land of Midian. And I told you a little bit about Neom, this great city that the Crown Prince is building. I'm going to let this video run. I think you'll be able to hear it, and you'll see all the construction that's just right on the outskirts of this. This is a huge construction area for the new city of Neom going up. They're building all kinds of roads and infrastructure, buying up villages, displacing people to build this new city. And the next thing we went to, this picture on the left, the sign is calling this Jethro's Well. So the locals have always said, oh yeah, Jethro's Well, Jethro's Tomb, Moses's Mountain. The locals have always believed that this is where the events took place. And so this was fenced off. This is a sign put up by the Saudi government, and we didn't get to walk back there, but it's the well that is believed to be Jethro's well, where Moses rescued the women at the well. And then on the right is Jethro's tomb. Now, actually, there were a lot of tombs here, and it's not uncommon in the ancient world that there'd be these caves, which were good burial places. So a few centuries later, another civilization, another people group is in control, and they're reusing this and redoing it their way. So these, the way they look now, they're sort of built in the style of the Nabateans. Anybody been to Petra? Petra, was built by the Nabateans. It's in that style of being carved out of the rocks there. But again, this is believed to be Jethro's tomb area. Well, so then the children of Israel move on, and they camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. The people thirsted for water, and the people grumbled against Moses and said, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" And I always thought, reading this over the years, that, gee, they should have had more faith. They'd come through the Red Sea, God had delivered them from Pharaoh. What are they so worried about? God is going to take care of them. Well, this is what it looks like. Can you imagine being out there with a huge multitude of people and animals? You'd be looking around, you think, we're going to die here. And I could empathize with their feelings more and more. I'll let this video play. It's a lot of wind noise. What the noise you're hearing, the roar, is the wind noise. And this, in the Bible, this is when the Amalekites attacked them, and this is a likely battlefield for them. It's likely the battlefield for the Amalekite battle at Rephidim. But you can see what people were seriously worried about their survival. Must have been hard following Moses. And I saw this cartoon that gave me kind of a chuckle. At the top, he says, "This way, follow me." And then at the bottom, it's saying, after 39 and a half years of wandering in the desert, Mrs. Moses secretly asked for directions. Well, also at Rephidim, there were these petroglyphs. And so these are ancient carvings in the rock, and you see hunting scenes and other things. So these were the first petroglyphs we saw, and it was quite exciting to see that evidence of ancient people. We'll see more of those soon. And then the next thing is this famous, the split rock, the rock at Horeb. So following up on this same incident, it's making me thirsty. Moses cried to the Lord, "What shall I do with this people? They are almost ready to stone me." And the Lord said to Moses, "Pass on before the people, taking with you some of the elders of Israel, and take your staff in your hand with which you struck the Nile, and go. Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock at Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water shall come out of it, and the people will drink." And Moses did so in the sight of all Israel. So the Lord says, the rock at Horeb. And you've got to believe that Moses knew this area pretty well, having been a shepherd there for a lot of years. And this thing is immense. And you can see the way it sticks out, the rock at Horeb, and is a reasonable description of it. So there's what it looked like when we came up to it. And here we are climbing up to it. And it gives you an idea how big it is. This is the area, the pile of rocks that the rock at Horeb is on. There's actually also evidence of hydrology of water at the base of this rock. And then some of the younger, more adventurous were climbing up in the cleft of the split rock. I didn't want to get hurt. I wanted to be able to finish the trip. But I did climb up to the rock there. And meanwhile, our guides had set up this beautiful picnic. They got the rugs out, they got the coolers out, they got the chairs out. And so we had a beautiful picnic there for a couple of hours, just admiring the rock at Horeb and enjoying the experience of it. And so this upper right-hand picture, you see that little blue dot? That's a person. So that's how big the rock at Horeb is. And so, again, just an incredible thrill for Madonna and I to believe here we are at the split rock. And the New Testament even references this rock as a symbol of Christ and the living water coming out of the rock, that kind of symbolism. So it was very meaningful for us. It was really a great moment for us. So I talked a little bit about the Crown Prince MBS's plan for Neom. Look at how big this is, that yellow area. It's all the way up the Gulf of Aqaba. And it'd take a long time to explain what he's doing there, but he's very interested in science fiction and video games. And he's building this futuristic city that's costing even more trillions than he expected it to cost. So it's kind of slowed down. But part of it is a ski area right here. This Trojena is right adjacent to where Mount Sinai is. And there is snow there a little bit, but obviously this would be an artificial ski area. So it's a very whimsical thing that he's doing. But look at this helicopter. This might be the kind of thing you'd use to haul cranes up the mountain so they could build Trojena and big vehicles, and you see warehouses and so on. So there was a lot of evidence, and this is right by Mount Sinai. It's really kind of disturbing that it's being disturbed like that. Look at here, the buses to take the workers to work, the modular housing to house the workers. Here's another picture of the housing and the vehicles. And again, this is right by Mount Sinai, probably where they're working on that ski area of Trojena. Well, back to the Israelites. They departed from Rephidim, which is the split rock area, and were come to the desert of Sinai, and had pitched in the wilderness, and there Israel camped before the mount. And so did we. So our Living Passages tour company had made connections with some local Bedouins and supplied them with this stuff. So these people set up tents for us, and we actually got to spend the night in cots in a tent. Right, that's Mount Sinai, right? That dark one right in the middle. And here's one of the Bedouins, and they set up this nice pavilion. And so we had a dinner and about 24 hours there. Really amazing. And then this is makes total sense that this is the golden calf altar. You remember when Moses was gone for 40 days, the children of Israel were freaking out, where's Moses? We need a God. So they made the golden calf and started worshiping it with the pagan sexual rites of Egypt, for worshiping this. And I'll show you some evidence of this. So on the pile, there's all these petroglyphs and there's cattle. Now, who would have cattle out here? Yeah, who would bring cattle out here to this wilderness? This wouldn't be a place if you were a cattle herder. You'd have to deliberately bring the cattle out here, right? For only reason I can think of is a sacrifice and or a religious festival. So here's these images, and then this one is really interesting. By the way, I mentioned that archaeologist from Jerusalem, Eli Sucron, who's got a big reputation. He's the main archaeologist unearthing the city of David that was discovered, I don't know, in the last 10 or 15 years and is being unearthed in Jerusalem. So he's a Jewish, Israeli archaeologist, pretty impartial on all this stuff. And he sees some ancient Hebrew writing in these petroglyphs. So he's very convinced that this is the site of the Exodus. And so here's these animals. Again, cattle, what are they doing out there? You see a camel. And if you look at the men below the waist, they are sexually excited. And so this isn't just, a hunting picture, a hunting party. This is involving, the pagan sexual rites. And we'll zoom in on one of them. This one guy here, like this, under the cow. Look at this inscription from a religious site in Egypt. See, it's the same thing going on. So it's very good evidence of this being the golden calf altar and the place where the golden calf was worshipped and all that occurred. So a few of the points. The Bible says that they built that altar or had that altar in the midst of the camp. They didn't build it. It was there. The petroglyphs show Egyptian-style cow worship. There's sexual rites in the worship. And then I mentioned the archaeologist Eli Sucron. Now, this nearby is obviously a graveyard to people with an eye for that kind of thing. You can see some of the tombs, and it's a mass grave site. And so why would there be a mass grave site out here? Who's out there with all these people dying? Well, after the golden calf incident, you may remember the Levites came in and they actually killed 3,000 people who were involved in the golden calf worship. And so here's a mass burial site. I don't know if anyone has done the carbon dating on the remains or the DNA, but wouldn't that be interesting if the carbon dating matched and the DNA was Hebrew DNA? Boom, that's very strong evidence. I don't know if that's been done. But anyway, this is fenced off, protected by the Saudi government. They recognize it as an archaeological site. So the next morning at our campsite there, the brave climbed Mount Sinai, and it's going to get up to 100. So we were up at dawn, so they could get started at dawn before the heat of the day. This isn't a hike, it's a climb, we were told, and you have to be in shape for it. Madonna and I didn't do it, but some people did, and we got up and prayed together and actually had a communion together before the climbers went up. And then the rest of us went to see what's at the base of Mount Sinai there. So again, this peak right in the middle, that's Mount Sinai. Another thing that happened hundreds of years later is Elijah. Remember, he was fleeing from Queen Jezebel, if you know the story, and he went to Mount Horeb and hid in a cave. And the locals say this is Elijah's cave. And there's a cave right there, on Mount Horeb, right where it should be. Okay, so here we are. Now, this is just of such huge significance. It's almost hard to even utter the words because this would be the altar. Remember, they built an altar of uncut stones was the direction. And this is the altar where the covenant of the children of Israel with the Lord their God was made. The covenant was cut, I understand, is the way it's said in Hebrew. And I'll show you some of the evidence of that. On the left, it's looking back away from Mount Sinai. So you can see it's flat and they could have been encamped out there. And here's Madonna and I. And then over here on the left side of that picture is the altar of Moses. And so this is Rhonda, the tour guide who's been there many times, and she's explaining this, and then I talk. So I'm going to let this video run, and you'll hear a little bit of that explanation.
And this is where the altar is, and I prefer that Joel come up here and do this aspect, but this is where the altar is. Well, but it would be wood, not rocks, right? Okay, and the cleansing pools are just below us. So the blood, you know.
So she's saying you need a cleansing pool. You know, you have the altar, the blood's got to go somewhere. And you have to clean the animals.
Would be the cattle chute for the sacrificial animals. And then you have to have a turn so they can't see what's happening to those ahead of them. So here we have the turn in the cattle chute. And then when they get up there is the altar, and down to the left is the cleansing pool. And this is the riverbed coming down. You know, obviously this valley was cut by a riverbed.
So we're there at the driest time of the year, but sometimes it's wet there. There could even be snow, conceivably at the peaks. And so there'd be a stream there. And actually, there's a few veins of marble up high on the mountain. And so there's a lot of white marble rocks and pebbles down below. And they were to build 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. And you know, is this marble what the pillars were built of? You know, it certainly fits with the story. Maybe we shouldn't have been sitting on them, but anyway, it all, you know, makes sense. If this is the altar, it fits with the biblical account. And then here's the ones who climbed to the top of the mountain, and here's their view from the summit. So in conclusion, Saudi Arabia today, what we saw is it's relatively friendly. It's open to tourists. It has first-class infrastructure. People still dress in traditional dress, women completely covered. The Neom construction is going on in the Trojena ski area. And there's some protection of unstudied archaeological sites. This could be great if a lot of tourists come in and a lot of people see this. This is, you know, tremendous evidence for the Bible being real. And the things that we saw, the Red Sea crossing place with the monument, the Elim with the palms and wells, the oases of Midian, Jethro's well, Jethro's cave, the split rock we saw, Mount Sinai with the cattle runs, water, stone altar, Elijah's cave, and the golden calf altar and the petroglyphs. Who cares? You know, hey, that just, you know, Saudi Arabia, Mount Sinai, you know, it doesn't sound that interesting. Well, the Judeo-Christians of Western civilization, how about that? God's commandments in writing in an alphabet. And for the next 1,000 years, what the prophets and the scriptures to Israel are saying, remember, I'm the Lord thy God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Remember the covenant. You know, people go to a lot of other Bible sites for tourism, nothing more spectacular than this. And if the evidence validates the biblical account, it becomes powerful historical proof of a miracle working God redeeming his chosen people from slavery in Egypt.
Thank you, Jeff. That was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Arnie will take questions from our audience.
I have two questions. What time of the year did you go there?
It was October of 2023.
All right, the next question is, I wish you had a close-up map and could point out exactly the itinerary that you took and what you did. Yeah. Do you have a close-up map?
I could probably come up with something like that, put the dots on a map and the labels on a map. That's a good suggestion if I do this again.
Yeah, so we could see exactly where you went and exactly the places that you were pointing out.
It was all pretty close together, but it took a long time because the roads aren't direct. You have to go way around here. But it's all within, maybe a 1,500-mile radius of that area on the east side of the Gulf of Aqaba.
Yeah, but it would have been good.
Yeah, good idea.
Oh, what a great presentation. I'm amazed at what you're able to see. But when Moses lived maybe 3,500 years ago, as we see the climate changing so much in just 50 years, was there evidence from your tour guide that the climate was much different, that there's a lot more vegetation for the shepherds 3,500 years ago?
I don't know what the evidence on that is, but it certainly seems like there was, that there were more people there. We were there at the driest time of the year, but it seems like it would have had to have been more moisture, more vegetation back then. But I don't know the evidence specifically.
Jeff, we have a question from chat. We had a comment from chat. I'll just mention that. Then I have a question. Ina Pearl is saying they didn't kill all the Hebrew children, only the males. That's what she is making a comment on. That's a biblical reference, but that's just a note from chat. My question is maybe directed more, if Arnie has the microphone, more to your wife. And I have a good friend who's a CEO of a big company and did Saudi Arabia visits. And when he met with a big company in Saudi Arabia, he met with the husband, the CEO of the company, and an 11-year-old male child. In the kitchen was a 17-year-old teenage child and the wife. And my question is that you were mentioning how accommodating Saudi Arabia was. Was there any indication of this treatment of women being different there? And did your wife notice any of that?
Well, my perspective, they were wearing burqas. They were in the mall in groups of women. It didn't look real open.
Okay.
I think that's true, Jeff. That women, women we saw out in public, like in the airports, were definitely dressed from head to toe with just the full burqa. But I wore a scarf a lot of the time, not all of the time, and I also wore a tunic type of dress. so that for modesty, that's what I was told to do. But there were many times where I didn't feel like I needed to have my scarf on. But I have to say, I was the only blonde in that airport.
Thanks for sharing.
Early on, you showed a map and that huge beach there. Weren't there about 1 million people from Israel who would need that big beach? I just noticed on your map that the beach looked huge.
Yeah, if the Bible is translated correctly and the numbers are right, it would have been over 1 million people. There are other theories on that, but it was a lot of people. By the way, here's the book. So if somebody would like to buy one for $15, I've got a few copies here.